Hello, everyone. Very warm welcome to all of you joining us from all over the world, different parts of the world, for this virtual solutions session of the Second World Summit for Social Development. My name is Shannon Coburn. I'm the head of education and training for the SDG Academy, which is the flagship education initiative of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, or SDSN. And I'm delighted to moderate today's session on global citizenship education for all. Looking forward to a lively discussion between all of our speakers, presenters, and of course you. So a quick reminder that there will be time for questions at the end of the session today. So please put your questions in the Q&A box, which you can find at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll do our best to get to as many of them as possible. So just to set the stage a little bit, 30 years ago, at the 1995 Copenhagen World Summit for Social Development, world leaders agreed that true progress needs to be measured not in wealth, but in well-being, dignity, and inclusion. And now, 3 decades later, as the world gathers in Doha and online for the second World Social Summit, we face the same challenge, but we also have an opportunity to renew the bold social contract that was set in 1995. The Doha Declaration that will come out of this summit calls on us to rebuild trust between citizens and institutions, to strengthen social cohesion, and to ensure that no one is left behind in our pursuit of sustainable development. But the question for us right now today is, what role does education play in renewing that social contract? I would say that education is the foundation of that social contract. It's important for us to understand education as more than just some sectoral concern, looking at things like literacy rates or graduation statistics, or looking at the education to employment pipeline. Education shapes how we understand one another, how we participate in society, and how we can act collectively for the common good. And global citizenship education in particular equips us with the knowledge, values, and competencies needed to navigate our interconnected world. Things like empathy, critical thinking, respect for diversity, and a sense of shared responsibility for people and planet. This utopian vision also raises a lot of practical questions about access and equity and implementation. So what does global citizenship education look like? Who is it for? How can it reach every learner, and not only the privileged few? And how can education systems translate these lofty ideas into daily practice? So today's session will explore these questions, looking at 2 different but complementary initiatives. So first, we'll hear from my colleague Karen Chan, Director of Education Studies at SDSN, who will share insights from the Mission 4.7 Malaysia project, which is a collaboration between our office at SDSN and Malaysia's Ministry of Education, working at the macro level, shaping national policy on education for sustainable development and global citizenship, and also working at the ground level, supporting teachers and school leaders as agents of change. And then we'll turn to Dr. Radhika Iyengar from Columbia University, who will present the Ages of Globalization curriculum, which is this innovative approach that traces the history of human society through a lens of interdependence, inviting learners to see themselves as participants in a global narrative that values cooperation and mutual responsibility. And then together we have these 2 projects offering both a systems perspective and a storytelling perspective on how global citizenship education can renew our collective sense of belonging. And then after the presentations, we will be joined by 2 more distinguished guests for a panel discussion to bring the conversation out into the open. Professor William Godelli is the inaugural Dean of the College of Lifetime Learning at Georgia Tech and the author of several books on global citizenship education. And Ms. Katra Olmez is the Chief Operating Officer of the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens. And together they'll help us reflect on how these 2 projects and other initiatives from around the world can inform how we leverage education as a driver of social integration. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Karen.
Thank you so much, Shannon, and thank you for this wonderful opportunity to be part of this webinar in conjunction with WSSD, and to be on this panel with such an esteemed colleagues, and with you, Shannon, as our moderator. It's really a privilege. Please allow me to share my screen. Are you able to see that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to talk about a very ambitious global project known as Mission 4.7, which has a secretariat that is chaired by Radhika, who is on this panel. And Mission 4.7 is really a global initiative to advance Target 7 of the 4th SDG on quality education. Okay, so this is it. This is Target 4.7. And I would like to just read out this really wonderful target: ensure all learners acquire knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including, among others, through education for sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of a culture of peace and nonviolence, global citizenship, and appreciation of cultural diversity and culture's contribution to sustainable development. Isn't that a wonderful target? Now, when SDSN opened its 3rd office here in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, it was set up to be the Asian headquarters, and Mission 4.7 was one of our flagship projects that was seen as really critical to transform education systems in this region. I would like to talk about our work with Malaysia that has gained quite a lot of headway. And I would like to start by just sharing a few of the challenges that exist here in Malaysia in our education system, focusing primarily on K through 12 education. So some of the statistics that I'm about to share with you show that there really is a need for transformed education, and one that is grounded on ESD and global citizenship education. For example, if you look at this chart, there is a very high level of learning poverty in Malaysia, despite the level of development that the country is at and the commitments that we have made through the various policies over the last few decades. So our learning poverty rate here in Malaysia, over here, it stands at about 42%. And this indicates that at the grade 5 level, 42% of students are not able to read and comprehend a simple text for their level. This is quite a high figure compared to other countries at the same level of development as Malaysia. On this chart, you can see Malaysia's performance at the latest PISA assessment, which is well below the OECD average. When we started out participating in the PISA, we stood at about at the bottom third of countries in the world. And in 2018, we rose to the middle third, but at the last iteration of the PISA assessment, we fell back into the bottom third again. So this again is not consistent with the level of development that Malaysia is at. If you look at our performance in mathematics, reading, and science, and this is assessed among 15-year-olds, most of our students are considered low performing. And if you compare that with the high performing students, which is a very small minority, again, this is low performing students are well above the OECD average, and high performing students are well below the OECD average. 46% of students attained below baseline proficiency in creative thinking. This again is quite alarming because it's almost half of our 15-year-olds, and the OECD average is only 22%. And incidentally, in PISA 2018, it shows that Malaysian students also scored among the lowest in the world on awareness of global issues, significantly lower than the OECD average. Okay, a final set of statistics that I want to share to show why intervention is really necessary. There is a significant difference in performance among the socioeconomically advantaged versus disadvantaged students. So as you can see in the graphs here, in a Southeast Asian study in 2019, students from the poorest quintile are far less likely to perform well on pre-primary readiness. So this is in the transition between, kindergarten and primary school and elementary school. The students from the poorest quintile are really not quite ready to enter primary school after preschool. And if you look at the chart on the right, you will see that there is at the same time a lack of teacher training in both inclusive education as well as in differentiated instruction. So, and this is consistent with the studies that we did in-house as well, which showed that training is really done to suit a one-size-fits-all kind of model, whereby when teachers are trained, they are selected and they go and attend training that is centrally conducted, and then they are expected to go back to their schools and cascade what they've learned, but context is not taken into consideration. So I will now talk about the pilot project that we embarked on. So it is based on a philosophy that ESD and global citizenship education represents a strategic foundation for strengthening Malaysia's education system. It is not merely to transmit knowledge on what global citizenship is, but it is really to cultivate a globally conscious and future-ready generation that is equipped to navigate the complexities of the 21st century. And aligned with Agenda 2030, this transformation demands a holistic recalibration of the educational ecosystem that is truly anchored in integration, inclusivity, and sustainability. When we conducted our first study back in 2022, it was really to conduct a situation analysis of where Malaysia stands when it comes to ESD and GSET in the country. And there were three main findings that stood out. Firstly is there have been global citizenship components incorporated into the new curriculum that was introduced in 2017, but very limited in-context explanations, very limited opportunities to apply learning, limited interdisciplinary learning opportunities, and almost a complete lack of material to guide teachers. When it comes to teacher training, we found that they do not get sufficient training in global citizenship education to be able to effectively incorporate its elements into existing subjects. And this is truly a missed opportunity to make education something that is future relevant for our students. Where teachers are, they take the initiative or they're passionate, they found themselves to be in it alone with very limited support from school leaders and from the entire organization, the school ecosystem, or in fact, the whole educational ecosystem to incorporate global citizenship education into their pedagogies. Their KPIs are focused mainly on the official subject-based syllabus with emphasis on syllabus completion and a high-stakes exam at the end of the day. So following the findings of that study, we developed an intervention that was really grounded on educator capacity building. And the vision is to create a future relevant, inclusive, quality education system in the country. And what this means is we want to future-proof education. We want a future-proof educational system that equips students for evolving jobs, evolving challenges, some challenges that do not yet exist. We want more inclusive, equitable, and innovation-driven learning ecosystems. We want a system that drives national, social, and economic transformation. And we want a globally competitive citizenry with 21st century competencies. Some of the competencies that Shannon mentioned earlier that are the competencies of global citizenship. The mission is educator capacity and pedagogy reform through ESD and GCED, where educators shift from content delivery to facilitation of critical thinking, empathy, and all of the other wonderful competencies that Shannon mentioned earlier, more personalized, inclusive, and interdisciplinary instruction. And this will lead to increased student engagement, agency, innovation through real-world problem solving, and a greater adaptability of curriculums to emerging skills, STEM approaches, and societal shifts. So the pilot intervention that we conducted in several schools across the country, whereby we trained all the teachers of that school, regardless of what grade they teach or what subjects they teach, but it is actually something that is relevant to all age groups and to all subjects. So these were some of the findings that we uncovered. Firstly, there is a truly untapped potential among our Malaysian our educators. This is because of traditional training models that I had mentioned earlier, siloed school environments, and very limited systemic support. And despite, the structural challenges that we have, when we conducted the training, we found that educators really demonstrated a very strong willingness and capacity to engage with global citizenship education. And they really understood how meaningful it was, how future relevant it is, and they appreciated how it is competency-based, contextual, and it provides a very collaborative value proposition for teaching and learning. So there is this huge underutilized reservoir of professional potential due to all of these traditional training models. Secondly, there is a culture of passive instruction, like I mentioned before, a true overemphasis on syllabus completion. In fact, that is really the KPI of educators, whereby as long as they complete the syllabus, regardless of whether the students were able to absorb and truly understand the concept, their KPI had been achieved. So as far as the educators are concerned, completion of syllabus means the box can be checked. Thirdly, there is a need to reframe teaching as a profession. There is a very narrow understanding of professional development. Teachers don't really see themselves as change makers or thought leaders. And this is really something that has developed over the years and become a big part of the organizational culture. And this limited understanding of professional development could really explain the reluctance or the hesitation in adopting more personalized, student-centered, interdisciplinary and collaborative approaches. Finally, there is a real need to reframe teaching as a profession, just like any other professions, like doctors or lawyers. Teachers really need to see themselves as professionals, and this kind of view of teaching as a vocation is grounded in agency, in purpose, and in leadership. And many educators in Malaysia lack the opportunity to see themselves as such. And the training's emphasis on educator empowerment helped to begin this shift in perspective. So we really saw it shifting. However, without certain enablers, none of these interventions would really have a sustainable effect. So some of these enablers are, first of all, there needs to be clear policy and direction. This may not be the case in all countries, but in Malaysia anyway, where education is very centrally controlled, the culture is such that unless it is explicit in policy and with directives, it is not really taken seriously. Another crucial enabler is leadership. And we saw this when we conducted our pilot where in schools where the leaders were very supportive, we saw a totally different approach to the training in terms of their attitude, their openness, their willingness to share, and their willingness to try new things in their classrooms. Another enabler is the organizational culture, as I mentioned. Community partnership is, again, an opportunity that remains untapped because there is a lot of problem-based learning that can be done, project-based learning as well, that can be applied to real-world problems around the school's community, and this is yet untapped. Finance is clearly an enabler. And finally, monitoring and evaluation is extremely important to track impacts of interventions. So where we are at, firstly, we developed and delivered the Teacher Professional Development Program on ESD and global citizenship. This is completed. Secondly, we really needed to incorporate ESD and GSET into the national education policy. And we have been successful in doing this, working in close collaboration with our colleagues at the Ministry of Education. It was difficult because we were invited to be part of the development of the new education blueprint. But when we asked for ESD and GSET to be a distinct strategy explicit within the blueprint, initially, our ministry colleagues said it's not necessary because it is embedded everywhere anyway. And we said, no, based on our findings, it has to be made really explicit. And we were successful in convincing them. So the next education blueprint for 2026 to 2035 will have a dedicated section on education for sustainable development and global citizenship. And finally, we are publicizing and trying to expand the use of the piloted materials and the resources we have developed in other countries in the region, of course, contextualized to their needs. And this is something that we are working on and still open to partnerships around this. So this is just to show the plan of how it's going to work. We have decided that for it to be really contextual and relevant to the extremely diverse communities that we have in this country, we have rural communities, we have schools in urban areas, we have schools in coastal communities, we have schools within indigenous communities. All of them have different needs and challenges. And a centralized approach that has been traditionally utilized is not going to work. So we have decided that we should go down to the local level and work with the district education officers. So it's almost like local governments, but in some countries, they call them provincial governments. We call them district officers. So we are proposing that in the 144 districts that we have throughout the country, there should be a training unit in each of them, and they will be responsible for the schools in that district. So that would make the training more customized to the needs of the schools in that community. So those are for in-service teachers. There are also 27 teacher education institutes and 20 public universities with schools of education, and all of them are responsible for producing teachers that would fill the needs of the public school system in the country. And we will also have trainers trained in these institutions to train the pre-service teachers. And then finally, a dedicated component for leadership training is also necessary, as we had discovered how leadership is so crucial in enabling impactful transformation of the education system. I think that's my time. So thank you so much and happy to take questions later.
Whoops. Thank you so much, Karen, for sharing, and I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more later. Before we move over to Radhika, I just want to say thank you for everyone who is introducing yourself in the chat and posting questions. We've had a number of questions of people asking for your slides. So if you wouldn't mind, panelists, if you feel comfortable, please drop your email in our chat so that people can reach out to you. Also, everyone, a lot of good information being shared here by Karen and sure more to come. I've been posting links in the chat as well for you to explore, and our panelists will also have the opportunity to post anything they'd like to share. So keep an eye on that as well. So over to you, Radhika.
Thank you so much, Shannon. And again, I want to say a big thank you to Shannon to organize this panel, which is coming at the right time where we are thinking about global citizenship in a transformatory way. And it's great that we have all this wide variety of approaches to global citizenship education. So thank you, Shannon, for getting us together and for your introduction to the framing of this panel. I think we all need to keep in mind as we go over to all the rest of the panelists as well, in terms of what does global citizenship mean to us, which is also Shannon mentioned about inclusivity and also about who's getting left out and how are we treating each other. So that's again something really important. And Karen, congratulations on this amazing work. This is super phenomenal, and it's so nice to see how you've taken and your team has taken this whole idea of ESD, global citizenship education, into practice with the government. So really looking forward to how we can learn from this example from Malaysia and use it in different parts of our work in different countries with different institutions. So amazing to hear about the progress that the Malaysia team has made along with the government. What I will be focusing on will be a little bit different from what Karen mentioned. Karen went deeper into one region and is focusing on in-country adaptation. And what we have been doing at the Center for Sustainable Development, along with a lot of our colleagues from SDSN and different partners, we went globally, and then we are looking at a much more global picture of interdisciplinary approaches. So I'll go over and share my presentation here. I hope we can all see it. So this is basically looking at global citizenship education through, again, as Shannon mentioned, inclusion, equitable access to quality education. And it started with us at Mission 4.7 having all these engaging discussions with ministries, colleagues, other learners about ESD and about global citizenship education. They come hand in hand, SDG 4.7. And people would ask, okay, this is interesting. Yeah, this is a very good idea, but how do we start? And we saw that people were already working on various different piecemeal approaches of global citizenship education and education for sustainable development, which was great. They were doing a lot of different, trying a lot of different approaches. But when we were thinking of saying, okay, can we make it more interdisciplinary and can we all come together as a global community like we are coming together? If you see the chat, people are joining from Congo, Pakistan, Oslo, US, Nigeria, everywhere. So this is again a reflection of how we are all together in this mission and how we are all learning from each other. So how do we come together and learn from each other is this course that we have developed here. Over to the next slide. I think Shannon mentioned a few priorities of what learners want to learn and what are the competencies. Here are, through our various different discussions, our colleagues and I, we've collected some ideas in our last session during UN General Assembly 2025. We discussed what is it, like there were 80 students or 80 learners present in our in-person meeting along with many others joining online, and we asked them, what's the one value or skill the next age of education must prioritize? Will they prioritize all of these different, and then they mention all of these different aspects. It was about empathy, it was about critical thinking, communication, open-mindedness, problem solving. There's one interesting one, eye contact, because in this age of digital aspects, there's less eye contact. So many people also mentioned eye contact, having a physical presence, respect, art, grit. Just maybe let's wait for a couple of minutes, a couple of seconds or so here on this slide to see what are people asking for. And maybe in the chat, you guys can also share what is the one value or skill the next age of education must prioritize based on where you are and what your journey has been. It says peace, morals. If you can mention in the chat, what is the value that you're looking for? I think it's just going to add on to this matrix here, which includes so many different competencies, curiosity, teamwork. So people are looking for, or learners are looking for, multiple aspects. And now the question is, does any one curriculum, can it address many of these? Which is a really big task, right? So how do we solve that problem where we are looking at a substantial amount of time that the learner spends in an educational institution, either higher education or preschool or K to 12? And are we doing justice to them not being with their families and them sitting there, and what are they learning? As Karen mentioned, that many people are lagging behind in basic literacy, numeracy skills. Are they also lagging behind in empathy, critical thinking, communications, joy, resilience, integrity? Something to think about as we proceed. So in all of our meetings, when we would go to various different ministries, they would say, oh yes, this is a very good idea. We are doing something, but it's not enough. And how should we begin this journey? And Professor Sachs had a book already on the ages of globalization that was released a couple of years back. And that was a start of an integrated approach to global citizenship education, I would say, because it's a journey about realizing who you are and how history has shaped us. So we started working on these different, post materials, understanding how various different was almost like a history class in life. Like you would go to the Great Wall of China and you would see how the Great Wall of China was built and how it was all, taken, how the history has shaped our thinking about Great Wall of China and what the significance has been. So we have this agesofglobalization.com. I'll put it in the chat also. And here are all the references and, lists that are over there. And it is addressing, as I mentioned, there is a book on the ages of globalization by Professor Jeffrey Sachs. And he worked on this particular book with all the separate, addressing all the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, because that was the ask. How do you learn about the Sustainable Development Goals through a global multidisciplinary lens, and how do you solve the local problems and challenges that you are facing? So that was like the ambition of this particular course. So we created the online course, which basically includes Professor Sachs going to all these interesting historical sites, which includes the Varanasi city in India. It includes the, in China, Great Wall of China. It includes many places in Greece. But it's connecting history to the current place. And so it is again a reflection of how the learner is able to understand globally, because a big part of global citizenship is to understand the global picture, not just the current but past. And the ways history is taught is very much local. Yes, you need to know about local history, but you also need to know about global history so that we can have a common understanding about our past and how it shapes our current. So here are the main big 8 questions that we are trying to address. You can read the questions on your own. It is a combination of history, philosophy, geography, technology, governance, where we are in terms of global peace, global ethics. And as you can see, when we talk of systems thinking approach, this course is addressing just that. It is not, it talks about economics, it talks about technology, it talks about how our histories have shaped who we are. And it is, in one sense, it is a very difficult course to slot it in the way we are in right now. Like, it's not a geography course, it's not a history course, it is not a technology course, it is not an economics course, but it talks about everything together. So that's the journey that we are taking all our learners on. It is a course that addresses the 21st century challenges, but also trying to see how we reach this place and what can we learn from the past so that we can have a better future. These are the 8 questions that we were looking at. And as I had mentioned earlier on, the perspectives, AOG, Ages of Globalization, perspectives and objectives include an understanding of a historical wisdom, geography and institutions and technology, culture and identity. It is a journey of sorts where you are learning from other parts of the world, but it is also trying to see how you can connect with the other parts of the world and people and their cultures and identities, because we are all in this together. And how can you, with that understanding, create a more empathetic world for yourself and for your local, neighbors and for your own locality. So you will, with all of that wisdom, you are now asked to look at the environmental aspects in your region and how are you using sustainable development goals to cut across these different disciplines. So basically you are looking at environmental education, but across, it's not a, I wouldn't call it a ESD course, because ESD, environmental education, comes in much later. You are actually thinking about history, you are talking about Paleolithic age, you are then coming down to Neolithic, and then you're coming down to the digital age. So through the 7 ages of globalization, it's a journey where you're visiting places. And I wish history is taught in a way which becomes much more live, so that you can actually learn from historical aspects of that place, and you are seeing how it is connected to your present. And then you're becoming your ultimate aim is that we are becoming stewards for the planet, so that you are looking at all the planetary aspects, you're looking at all the planetary issues, but through a historical lens, through Greek philosophers' lens, through how UN and other institutions were formed, and taking that journey forward. And then you're also looking at what Karen mentioned, place-based learning, and seeing how all of this could be rooted in the learner's heritage, culture, journey, and stories. So it is bringing all of this wisdom to your own place, because otherwise you get all of this amazing knowledge, but how is it going to change anything that you are situated in? How can you become the steward of the planet, is what we are trying to drive at. So really a systems thinking approach, you learn from all these cross disciplines, and then you as a learner is connecting to your own place and the challenges that you see. It is quite a journey of sorts, because it has 28 classes, and each class has at least 4 or 5 chapters. It is quite intense, because it is obviously taking you from Paleolithic, Neolithic, equestrian, classical, ocean, industrial, and digital. And as one of the designers of the course, and thanks to our amazing team, which includes SDSN and Center for Sustainable Development, I think we are all learning as a part of designing this course. We are all making these ages come to life, and we are all trying to relate it to our own locations. The class, then there are 28 classes, as I mentioned, and first classes, the first 1 to 6 classes, I would say, is like a foundational course, which is very much Professor Sachs's book, Ages of Globalization, which is, by the way, available for all the learners here for free. And the classes 7 to 24 are the 7 ages of globalization, which he talks about why it is important to have these 7 ages of globalization and what are its characteristics and how, which age are we living in, and how what are the current challenges are basically in the classes 25 to 28. Lot of different aspects here with the learners and the young people getting a lot of insights on how can they become leaders in their own context, and what are some of the tools available. So these are the 28 classes. Online, as you can imagine, it was quite a challenging task to create this all-encompassing course, which is global and local at the same time. We are very lucky that this course is free, and anyone can take this course at any point in time. All the materials are available online on a platform. If you go to agesofglobalization.com, you will be able to see all the different features of the course, and you'll be able to register for free. It integrates world history, science, geography, and technology, as we have mentioned. It is an immersive. The best part about this course, which is unlike any other MOOC that is out there, is about UNESCO's cultural heritage sites. So actually is a way of going to all these heritage sites, celebrating the contribution that the UNESCO cultural heritage sites offer to each and every citizen. And many of the people are lucky to be situated there. But if you are not, and if you want to go to a cultural site, then you can actually join the course and view it with a cultural lens, historical lens, and actually you will be able to see all these heritage sites in the course itself, and you will be actually visiting the site online. It is, a lot of it is video based. There's also ESD lesson plans that are available for teachers, for educators who can be a part of this whole movement. When I say teachers and educators, we worked on the school version of it for the students who are in K to 12 schools. And now there is a higher education version of it that will be released with Professor Sachs doing live lectures. So again, I urge you to visit the Ages of Globalization website so that you can be a part of the higher education journey as well. Another thing I wanted to mention here is the interactive maps that is available. So when I say geography, it doesn't really mean going to a place. Geography also means looking at maps, looking at GIS enabled maps, and seeing how that place evolved over the past millions of years. So you actually get to play with all these maps and see what has been the trend over the past thousands of years. How has that location changed in respect to all of these different I would say sustainable development goals, also, other like trade and the sea routes and lots of different things that have evolved over the years, industries. Based on each of the classes, there are all these interactive maps that have been made available that are all GIS enabled, and that itself is a course on its own. So you can spend enormous amount of time playing with the maps and using it for your own school projects or university projects. I regularly use these maps as a part of my own learning, and when I'm working on different papers. So that's a big part of this course. And then there is also again a global classroom which talks about bringing all, like us coming together. It also brings in all these different students coming together and It is a live discussion, as I'll go over in the next couple of slides. I think these are already, I mentioned the big part about this is UN leaders coming and talking to students like us, learners like us, and there are all these world leaders who are talking about peace and security, climate change, poverty. These are live sessions that our team hosts, which are a big part of this course, which makes it more unique. It's not just online and there and available, but it also has this, material for school assemblies and UN UN model clubs that could be utilizing this particular course. So again, I mentioned where these live leaders are coming in. It's called the UN at Your Doorstep, which our colleagues at SDSN host, and they are an amazing forum where young individuals or youth are able to ask questions to all of these UN leaders. So it's a great way of engaging with young leaders. They take over our social media. They have all these questions prepared for the UN leaders, and I think it's a very energizing meeting. Some of them we've mentioned here. This is one of the live events, and we have all these different topics that were reflected in those dialogues, and that itself is like I think I would call it a carnival, because lot of people with lot of energy. Some kids are sitting in their bedroom, some kids are sitting in the classroom, some kids are sitting in cafes, some are looking at a TV, and there are 50 students watching the TV with this discussion going on. It's electrifying to see how many students join this particular live session. These are some of the outcomes that we are looking at: cognitive, socio-emotional, and behavioral, very much in alignment with UNESCO's ESD for 2030 framework. Not just looking at cognitive and test abilities, but also having some sort of emotional connection with our planet, and then how do you bring in the behavior change using the content from this particular course. Teachers have greatly benefited from this, or I would say that it's just been a mutual community that we have formed so that we can all learn from each other's experiences. They have come together. Some of them are here. This is our Global Educator Committee, who are basically our teachers who are taking this to a completely different level. Some of them are teachers at school. Some of them are teachers who are training other teachers. They are adapting all the materials, changing things for use. And so these are our selected global educator, I would call them influencers, and they are really our champions to see how we can take this forward and take it to in different forms. But along with that, there are around 4,000 people who have registered for the course, and many of them are again, are teachers who are taking this course to their own classroom. So I would definitely, if there are educators in the group, definitely join in as an educator on our learning platform. I think all of this is we've covered. These are a little bit of details. I don't want to take a lot of time, maybe just 1 minute more to see, to just give you a glimpse of the extent of the course. Many students are taking the course in different, based on where they are in their learning journey, and or some of them are taking sequentially. We would love you to take the entire class 1 to class 28 sequentially, because it takes you from Paleolithic to digital. So if you've taken the entire span, then it's much more beneficial than taking few things. But you are also welcome to just join in at our UN at our doorstep live sessions to get a feel of what the course material is and talk to the UN leaders as well. We are not in this alone, and especially me, I am representing our core team at SDSN and Center for Sustainable Development, along with many other partners. And it's just become a movement that we are driving forward. And many leaders, many students, many educators are joining our forum. It just adds more, I guess people are here to learn from each other. So I guess we are all creating a kind of an ecosystem where no one is the expert, but we are all learning from histories and geographies and various different aspects that has not been seen before, such an integrated program. So I think it's a great platform. And thank you, Shannon, for allowing us to be part of this so that we can again share a word or two about the course and also get insights from everyone else to see how we can all improve and where all we can go with this particular course. If you have a phone, if you want to do a screenshot, here is a screenshot to connect with us. We have a newsletter that goes out to many thousands of individuals every month. And then please click on to the agesofglobalization.com to get more insights. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you, Radhika. Definitely a lot to absorb there. There's the pre-recorded course that you can take. There's there are the live sessions. There's the resources designed for secondary education. There are the resources designed for higher education. So I encourage everyone, I posted the links in the chat. Please take a look at everything, explore everything, and feel free to reach out to the team at Ages of Globalization and to Radhika if you have any questions navigating all of that fantastic work that's been shared there. So now I want to open it up to our panel discussion and reflect sort of on the themes that we've started here. So bringing back Professor William Godelli and Katri Almez, questions for the both of you. Let's start with just reflecting here on the two projects we just looked at, Mission 4.7 Malaysia and Ages of Globalization. Each in their own ways, they speak to this idea of the renewed social contract, the idea that we need to build trust with people and institutions. So I think that's a little bit more on the Mission 4.7 Malaysia side, but also understanding and developing senses of inclusion and shared purpose through our education, both how we structure it and also what we teach. So from your perspectives, I'm curious about how you see these examples and others that you're familiar with, telling us about how education systems can evolve if they really want to support this vision of global citizenship education. And so what kind of shifts in mindset and policy and practice do we need to make education a true force for social integration in today's world? Professor Godelli, if you don't mind, we'll start with you. And then Katri, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Yes, thank you, Shannon, and thanks all for joining. Wonderful presentations this morning. It really does inspire me about the future of this work, which I've now been engaged with for some 30 years. And it's great to see how much support there is globally for this kind of work. So I just wanted to reflect a bit about the two projects under sort of examination today. And to me, they center on the theme of access to quality education, as well as underscoring the role that students have or teachers have in engaging and in creating this future. And I think one of the primary sort of problems that we have in higher education in particular, but I would say across the lifespan, is the limitation of access, not the limitation of talent. So we build high walls around what is proprietary. We exclude people systematically. In fact, in higher education in the United States context, you gain in stature when you exclude more people. So it's deeply anti-systematic in terms of, fundamentally it's anti-democratic, because it's denying people access to that which they need, which is information and knowledge to continue to flourish and to grow. And so that's a fundamental challenge. It's one that the reason I recently joined Georgia Tech as the Dean of the College of Lifetime Learning is because that's what this whole college is about. How can we run to learning in every sort of sector that it occurs in society and support it and open its access through high quality education? So that's fundamental. I think it's fundamental to the project that Jeffrey Sachs and others are engaged with, that Radhika shared with us. I think it's fundamental to the charge that Karan Chand shared about what's happening in Malaysia. I mean, to me, this is the future. Like, we have got to get this right. And the systematic exclusion of populations, be it in the global south, be it in the global south that exists right here in the state of Georgia, that has got to be addressed in order for us to really be serious about leaving no one behind. And so I see that as both very promising, but also a very daunting challenge, because it's very much built into the way in which we think about education, which is it's of better quality if fewer people have access to it. That's really the root of the higher education system in the United States and globally, arguably. And so it's something that we have to get right. Something that we're looking at here at Georgia Tech with the College of Lifetime Learning, we have initiatives in computer science in rural schools throughout the state of Georgia that has really taken off and created programmatic opportunities for students and teachers to learn and engage in computer science, and then to potentially see themselves as doing that kind of work later in their lives. We also have an initiative around STEM education that reaches students throughout the state of Georgia and beyond. Again, opening the aperture and saying it's not about excluding people, it's about including people and making accessibility a center and a core of what we do. I think the other piece that we need to rethink, and I say this with all generosity and due respect, because I've been a teacher my whole life, but I think we focus way too much on teaching and not enough on learning. And I say that because the flipping of that script is essential to get this right. We have got to stop thinking about how do we prepare curricula, prepare experiences for teachers, more teacher training, and we've got to think about how do we reposition the learner as the sovereign agency of learning. And when we do that, it shifts the way that we think about creation of ecosystems. It shifts the agency and the allowance for choice and development of a problem-based learning apparatus within curriculum. So it really does shift a mindset. And it's one of the reasons that the new college is not called lifetime education, it's called lifetime learning. Because we have to recognize that fundamental to being human is learning. It's a piece that literally never dies with us. It stays till the very end, and it exceeds all of our other capacities. We continue to learn to the very end. I like to say it's birth to earth. Like, that's the way we think about learning, because it is so fundamental to what it means to be human. And arguably, we lose our humanity when we're not learning. So if we think about it that way, we don't focus so much on the teaching. That is a mechanism to the learning, but ultimately, the sovereignty of the learner and the learning system should really be premised on that individual or those people. And often we talk about being student-centered or being focused on the client or whatever you want to call it, but oftentimes we get very wound up in what we're doing in the teaching side and not enough focused on what's happening for the learner. So I think I'll stop there. There's a lot to reflect on here. Happy to answer other questions, but I really enjoyed listening and learning more about what all of our colleagues are up to in the world, and look forward to more conversation.
Thank you for sharing and sharing all the work that's you're leading at Georgia Tech. Katri, I'd love to hear your thoughts too.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon, and thank you again to all the panelists from my side as well. I'm happy to represent the Ban Ki-moon Center here today. Might be unknown to some participants. We are an NGO focusing on global citizenship and empowering youth and women for a sustainable future. And our connection kind of to the panel today is that we work very closely with SDSN on our youth agenda, and then also we work very closely with Radhika personally, but also with Jeffrey Sachs as our board member on the many important topics discussed today. From our perspective, kind of as the Ban Ki-moon Center, looking into both presentations, I can very kind of gladly and happily say that all our work really aligns with all the many values mentioned by Radhika and Karen. And it's all embodied in what a global citizen is, and this is what we're working on. And where I can kind of bring in a new comment on this would be, we recently had a global citizenship education forum last week. And in this kind of forum, which was the third, our real focus is to see how do we move beyond the Agenda 2030. So from all of the findings that Karen shared and what Radhika is presenting in the course, how do we take all of those and move beyond and future proof the education? And what was kind of reflected and now echoed in those two presentations is definitely kind of the shifting from KPIs, like Karen said, that where we say, okay, we tick the box because we've delivered this lesson, but to shifting to more of a kind of focus on values. What are the values we need to create sustainable futures? And then also kind of creating an education system that rather than says you need to take math, science, literature, but answer the question, why do we need to take these? Why do we need to take these lessons? And how do we use them to address the risks that are currently we're living through and the ones that we don't know that are even happening? And then something else that came out, especially I would say from the ages of globalization, is creating meaning. So creating context. Why are we working on the things we're working on? And giving young people and teacher and everyone in the community a meaning of why do I act? So these were kind of the general context that we came up with, but also that I can see replicated in these presentations. So I think kind of to maybe summarize in 3 shifts, as you said, Shannon, what is the mindset shift we're looking into? Definitely it would be from kind of ticking boxes and delivering content and syllabus to seeing how do we actually form human beings to be participants in future de-risking. And when it comes to policy shift, we can say, how do we move from the fixed KPIs we've had on performance, but more focus on how do we measure inclusivity? How do we measure resilience? How do policies embed all these values rather than kind of metrics, numeric metrics? And then maybe for the practice shift, I can echo what the Dean just said, moving from education to learning, moving from lecturing one-sided to actually having conversations and focusing on collaboration. So our kind of underlining summary of the forum and where we're focusing on is right now, really seeing how do we shift education from institutions to a more collective action that will allow all community inclusion and leaving no one behind.
Thank you for sharing those insights and your work and for telling us about the forum. It looked very exciting. I put a link to it in the chat if people want to explore that. That happened last week. I have other questions, but I'd love to give Radhika and Karen, if you have any responses to what we just heard. I think overall we're hearing something that's not new, but is always increasingly urgent, which is that we know what we in the field, we know what we want out of education. And I think Professor Godelli said it well, which is we don't want education, we want learning. We want the outcome of education. And year after year, we continue to have this conversation. So projects like Ages of Globalization, projects like the Mission 4.7 work, always trying to move the needle a little bit more, both in terms of what we're teaching and how we're teaching and how we're imagining the role of education in society. But Radhika, yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you, Shannon. I think I wanted to just raise this point that every time we think of transformatory education or value-based education, I want to call it transformative because we seem to have forgotten all values and we want to bring that value-based education back. And what Bill mentioned about education and the purpose of education rather than, us, like what do the learners want to learn. There's always all these, I guess any transformatory way is not really, there's not a clear path forward. We have to there's so many challenges that come in our way. I'm sure Karen will know a lot about integrating ESD in in the education system. So paths are not made. We have to go through so many different hoops. For example, for the ages of globalization, we always say that yes, education needs to be interdisciplinary, climate education needs to be interdisciplinary. Now there is this course that we are working on which is highly interdisciplinary, but which teacher should take this on? Now is it because we are still doing siloed based education, we are still doing the structure is set in a way that it is almost like a factory system. You learn this, you learn this, you learn this, you don't know how to connect it, and you don't know how to apply it. And then you graduate, and then you're like, you have learned all these aspects, you are very cognitively, you are very sound, but your behavioral aspects, you don't, you litter around. That doesn't really make a difference because it's not your home. You will have, like, it has nothing to do with amount of education that you've had. You will also not probably, you will not have a problem waging wars against each other because you are valueless, and you've already gained, like, whatever education you've reached. So I think, I don't know if there needs to be uh, other ways of doing things. The implementation of education has been so weak and so out of date that there needs to be something that we need to be focusing on, rather than what we have, what we call as education. So just I think it was a provocative statement. I don't know whether there will be any right or wrong answers, but eager to hear from all of us.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty damning indictment of the system that we have. I think it served its purpose in the massification of education and the creation of a workforce and extending education to more people. Education used to be the purview of the rich and powerful gentlemen. But we're beyond that now, and it's time to rethink the role that education plays in our society, as we've been saying. And I think we continue to come across new challenges. We haven't really solved the old challenges, and now we've got AI, and now we've got brain rot, and now we've got an increasingly stressful misinformation campaign. There's a lot that needs an educated population, and we're still playing catch up. And so, Karen, I want to hear your thoughts on this too.
Well, I think you said the cliche word AI. So picking up on that, I think, also based on what Radhika said, and if we just keep focusing on the outdated knowledge transmission model, AI can do that much better than any human being can. So if technology can take care of the content part, then perhaps education's role is really to build the values, the character, the behavioral aspects, the attitudes, the passion, and this has to start very young, because it really has the potential to develop the way, kids think, and they will carry that with them throughout their life. And equity is so important here. Every learner has to be given the opportunity to access transformative quality education. That's one. But there has to be systemic reach. It has to really be absorbed into the very fabric of schools. Concepts of global citizenship. This is a non-negotiable in my view. And very importantly, it has to be context driven. There was a question in the Q&A just now about how our systems being contextualized based on their local realities and their local beliefs and local philosophies. I think this is very important. We cannot just adopt something that is foreign to us and expect learners to be able to relate to that. It makes a lot more sense to use the local philosophies, the beliefs, the cultural heritage that they have, and use those aspects to relate these values to. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, and I thank you for bringing up that question. That kind of leads me into where I wanted to go next. Is we did have questions in the chat, and it was something I wanted to bring up as well, is how do we localize these big ideas, and also, how do we make sure that when we're telling these global stories that we consider whose stories and perspectives and voices are centered in our curricula? How do we acknowledge who's missing? As the world, or say as the world gets more complex, but as we maybe recognize the complexity of the world that's always been there, there's so much more to incorporate into our teaching and learning, into our curricula, into our pedagogies. So how can we make sure that we do this work thoughtfully and incorporate as many perspectives? So I think also both localizing to the lived realities of the recipients of the education or the participants in the education, but also as we're crafting the materials, even within local context, there's always different levels of privilege in any context, and how can we keep that in mind even at the local level? If anyone has thoughts.
I guess I just want to say that, you know, the beneficiaries of any intervention project cannot just be beneficiaries, they have to be co-creators. And this is one way to make it very localized and to make it a story for every school or every community to make their own. And I think also it is important, data is important. It's important to capture outcomes, impacts, to document them, to track them. And I guess at a policy level, this becomes very valuable information to be able to target you know, resources or interventions based on where the needs are.
Yeah, I think I would add that, so if you are student-centered in the way that you're engaging in learning, then you inherently bring in the student experience to that learning. So I think that's the way forward, which is rather than try to prescribe micro-curricula across regions and populations across the planet, that if you're really student-centered, and you begin with the student voice and the situation of the student's life world, and try to expand from there to the global interconnectedness of that life world, and have them begin to habitualize that way of thinking in themselves vis-a-vis the world, both locally, regionally, nationally, and across states and beyond. I think that helps to create the volition towards a more resonant, a less hegemonic, a less oppressive type of learning, which is, you know, and we talk about sort of the hegemony of the global north. I think you see the hegemony of global north pedagogy as well, which is everything is always external to the learner and must be pushed in rather than drawn out. And we know that real learning, real knowledge development is a co-creation between the self and the world. And so really thinking about that calculus and how do you create that within a learning ecosystem is fundamental to how we go forward. And I think addresses, maybe not in totality, but addresses to some degree, this concern about the imposition of learning from beyond. Much of that imposition from beyond is occurring as a result of the pedagogy of the global north, as much as it is the geopolitics of the global north. So,
Radhika.
I think Bill already, I guess, I addressed what I had in mind, and I think we had this philosophy, what Bill mentioned, about keeping the learner as the person in mind, and having a dialogue rather than doing like a education download of some sorts. Because what I have realized with the ages of globalization is that the students are much more, they know what they want to learn, and they are there and they have their own journey because there's so much material available. And so with the ages of globalization, they come in and they know what they want to learn and how they want to experience it. And what we are helping is to connect the dots with the global to local application. Otherwise, they are on their journey and they are they are learning on their own. What we face challenges is that how do we integrate this into a university? How, because of the systems in place, because of the bureaucratic challenges that we have in way. So I feel that I think this bureaucracy somehow, which is a blockage of what the students need to learn and what their trajectory is, it needs to go away, and students need to be the center for higher education and for schools. So somehow we need to clear out these obstacles and have the students' learning trajectory as the motive of learning, rather than bringing in all these superficial barriers that every institution has, which is not really benefiting the learners in their learning journey.
Yeah, I think it's what needs to happen. It's certainly a bit of a tall order, though, in pushing against these institutions. Kadri, I hate to put you on the spot, but I think that this is a perfect opportunity to talk about maybe the role of non-formal education and sort of outside of the system, and maybe if you could share a little bit about some of the programs that the Ban Ki-moon Center runs and other programs that you've supported, and how we can work around the system in the meantime.
Happy to. I was also like thinking, shall I bring the conversation outside of higher education? But surely this was so kind of the concept of inclusivity and was also discussed at the forum. And what stick with us definitely is that we have to stop thinking of like including people at the end of things. So even something basic as creating a panel of speakers, we look at the speaker list and we're like, oh, we don't have a young voice here, we should include someone young. We don't have a teacher here, let's include someone young. So it's kind of shifting the mindset of we should be inclusive to this must be set from the beginning. Any kind of policy regulation system that's created must from the beginning include everyone. Otherwise, we're continuously creating kind of systems or platforms, tools, softwares that are leaving certain communities behind, certain groups of people behind. So this kind of came up. And with that in mind, kind of the localization part of this, we've worked with around 400 change makers around the world. Through our various programs, we have different scholarship programs where our main goal is to give skills, tools to the young people that will enable them further in their life. It could be trainings on how do you write a business proposal? How do you develop budgets? How do you market your idea? How can you go and present something to a different group of people? We try to do this with different experts, and we also put them together with previous change makers. So they get mentored from someone who's around their age, and we try to match people from the same country, or at least the same region, so they can actually talk about the same problems they've been through and have real practical solutions and not kind of fluff in the air. And then alongside that, we really focus on learning by doing. So all our programs at the Ban Ki-moon Center have a project side to it. Sometimes we're able to give seed funding for them to implement the ideas. Sometimes they already come with existing ideas or organizations that we help them get further. So these projects right now, we're calling them SDG micro projects. We're thinking, what are we going to name them in the future, of course. These projects can be something small as one workshop in their community school, teaching the students what global citizenship means. Or it could be something as big as someone has founded an NGO that is supporting many different schools across a certain region, providing consistent mentoring, etc. And what we are lucky to receive through this process is constant feedback on how can we better our programs to address the local needs of these young people. because they know what is happening in their communities. We don't come top down and say, you have to do this. They come to us and say, this is what we need to better our community. So I think this is kind of a very good hands-on application of non-formal education, definitely.
I think you brought up something important in this work, not just in teaching, but in the advocacy for change, both from educators, from researchers, and from the students themselves, and from the community of people like we have here at this webinar, which is the importance of building a community of like-minded people that you can turn to and get ideas from, and sort of this constant improvement. But I think something else, and something that I think you said came out of the forum, was also, it's really easy to get burnt out, both as an advocate for change, as a teacher with a million things on your plate who's being told to change what they've been doing and how they've been taught to do things. Karen is nodding her head. That's something that came up a lot in her work. And then also, of course, as a young person, as a student, living through difficult times, being told everything they need to learn, and then being told they need to change how they're learning. It's a lot for all of us to deal with. So I wondered if you can speak a little bit to how we can mobilize education as a force for resilience. And then I'd love to hear other people's perspectives as well, as we come to the end of our time.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely also in our work focus on resilience building. And here we have to look into more the emotional intelligence side of things rather than the traditional education system. So I think what we're trying to embody in the work we do is, when we're working with young people, the first thing we want them to be able to do is understand the situation. So do they have the deep knowledge? Do they have the facts, the perspectives on what is happening? Once there is this kind of deep understanding of the situation, then comes the critical thinking. How do we think about this process? What are the questions I have to ask? What is happening around the world that could mirror the situation at hand? And then as a third layer, we definitely encourage the social skills. This is kind of the mentoring aspects we do. So how do you build a community that's supporting you? How do you engage with other stakeholders? How do you gather people around your cause? And how can you experience other situations? So it could be, for example, the Ages of Globalization course, where you're able to go through these stories and see what has happened before, learn from achievements or mistakes done before. So we definitely kind of encourage this cross-border relationship building. And then this brings us to what is our motto at the center, which is act with passion and compassion. So once you've understood the situation, you've asked the relative questions, you're thinking creatively, you've had some sort of experience, some exchange with other partners. And now, how does this relate back to me? How can I take all this information and see how this can contribute to my role and my place in my community? And this is where compassion comes into play. And once we've done this, the last step we say is, now we're going to act. We've done all of these. How do I reflect all this knowledge, emotion I've experienced? How do I reflect this into my behavior that creates a resilient behavior set, let's say? And how do I act collaboratively? So this is kind of the framework we're following for the resilience building. And it's never ending, because once you act, there's outcomes, there's learnings, and then you go back to the loop and you're like, okay, what happened? Let's understand. And then you restart the cycle.
Maybe just from my side, Shannon, just to what Kathy just mentioned, I think this idea of community is very important because we are, and the education system is made us very insular. I'm gaining all this knowledge. I'm going to pass my exam. I'm going to have a better career. And we are forgetting, at least in the United States where I am, there is no sense of community in terms of how we all, are in this together. So creating that sense of community through whatever means, maybe through the school if there is an opportunity, maybe parents, maybe having a wider community group, informal groups, or being a part of the township planning, something. I think that community those places need to revive, and hopefully we'll be able to use our education skills in various different ways in our various communities that we are part of. I just want us to be a little bit more cognizant of these communities and play a leadership role, or play an active role in these communities if there are existing, or maybe we can create one in our own places. So I think that that's something that will bring in more resilience and will have that social emotional aspect as we go forward.
Can I just pick up on that real quick? I know we're running out of time, but in the work that we have been doing and in the development of the national ESD and GSET action plan that we're developing, one of the key strategies is school-home community collaboration. And this really addresses another critical challenge in the system here, where there is actually a very high dropout rate between middle school to high school. So upon completion of middle school, there's a dropout rate before high school. And why this happens is at the age of 16 is when kids can get a motorcycle license, and many of them then drop out to, become a delivery rider, etc., and start earning an income. And one of the reasons for this is because they are very disengaged from whatever they're learning in school, and they don't see it benefiting them in the longer run. So this school-home community collaboration really enables, problem solving and bringing local challenges or any kind of project, and turning a school into a living lab for problem solving of whatever is going on around them. This is really a tool to engage learners much better and really increase their level of ambition, so that they don't say, okay, there's no hope for me, I might as well just start earning a meager income. And it really affects their lifelong outcomes.
I'm afraid we are coming to the end of our session. I want to thank all of our wonderful speakers for the presentations, for the commentary, for sharing all of your insights. I think this is a perfect and beautiful note to end on, which is the power and importance of community. So building it among ourselves as educators, activists, advocates, people who care about building a better world and a better education system, and then taking that enthusiasm and bringing it to our various communities that we are also part of, both lived communities and subject matter communities and anything else. I saw a lot of really nice discussion and sharing in our chat as well. A lot of people sharing projects that they work on or work that they do, emails, LinkedIn. I shared links to everything that's been discussed today. So before we go, please make sure everyone to comb the chat and pick up on everything. You can find contact information, social media, and everything on all of those websites. So thank you so much for joining, and we hope to stay in touch with all of you and see you in future events. Thank you so much.